Hello world of YouTube, and welcome to the third list in List Week 2023. My picks for the 11 worst albums I spun over the last 12 months from 2023. These were actually kind of hard to fully nail down because unlike years past, whenever I dipped my toes into various morbid curiosities, I did get some pretty negative results. While I've been saying a lot recently that when diving into new music, my biggest conclusion is that you hear a lot of just okay things, there were some genuine points where I was kind of let down in ways that I wasn't expecting with some of the stuff I spun, and also just had some records that had some serious diminishing returns when it came to like revisits of them. I don't know. This is an interesting worst of list to pull together more so. Without further ado, though, let's go ahead and dive in. Give it a like if you're excited. And my pick for number 11 would absolutely have to be...
Couple lean got me questioning my sanity. All this footage on the phones could be damaging. So drunk that I could barely see. Is it...
While my continued excursions throughout the algorithm of TikTok for music recommendations was stronger than ever in 2023, you can tell by looking at my 50 best singles playlist, there were a handful of songs that were absolutely just from my For You page that I thought were pretty solid. And Prof's Horse had at least a track on there that absolutely was close to ending up on the same playlist, but with more revisits I gave to this, the more that I just disliked a lot of the things I already didn't like about the project, in the veins of some of the more melodic-driven stuff, some of the personality-driven stuff that I just don't think hits as hard as some of the other stuff that I've spun throughout the year. While I like some of the nostalgic nods that the production takes, I think when it's not dipping into that, it's not giving anything super compelling in my opinion. And I think that as far as like hopes dashed in a pretty heavy way, given how much I liked some of the stuff I did like, this would definitely be an example of that. The craziest thing about Mikazuki Big Wave's Escape ending up on this list is that it's not for the reasons that I disliked their last record in particular especially, but had criticized other recent releases I had checked out from their catalog. It's because while it does make an attempt to be different, I think that they don't really pull together some of those new ideas in ways that I think are all that interesting. And it's kind of disappointing, because I've gone back and re-listened to some of their stuff that I've really enjoyed, and I still find some great enjoyment out of it. And the sounds that are here still evoke that joy, but it feels so lacking in a direction that I think is as compelling. And that's really unfortunate. I hope that they can recapture that energy, or at least adapt it into something else that is consistently compelling. But as far as a misstep, I'm kind of unfortunately think that Escape definitely feels like one in some choice ways. Actually, everything I kind of said about the Mikazuki Big Wave record also plays to the point for Life Is But a Dream, Avenged Sevenfold's Mr. Bungle album, which, already sounds weird on paper, but I think the actual finished result is just as bizarre of an attempt. I know this record does have fans, and there are people that really enjoy what the group did on here, and while I can admire the effort, I think that just the band's own idiosyncrasies really don't work with a focus on what had been just sort of mild experimentations throughout their catalogs past. I think that if they retooled components of their sound, this could probably work. But it just, again, similarly to Escape, just left me baffled in all the wrong ways. And I just didn't think that this execution was good.
They said check, then I washed up, I gotta tell them pull out the facts. A lot of them stuck on Planet Rock like...
While maybe a little bit better than some of the heavy focuses sonically or thematically Tech has dove into in recent memory, Bliss just left me cold in ways that were kind of disappointing. As far as keeping to a thematic idea, I think he had something here that at least felt different from, some of his excursions in recent memory. But I think that the way that it was done, the pacing of the project, and again, just some of the songs don't really come together, and Tech is in this era where his songwriting can be hit or miss still, but it does more often than not, for me personally, miss in some really choice ways. It definitely feels like it's more just a disconnect from me as a fan to some ways that he decides to write or some topics he decides to choose to write about. But this is definitely an example of like a lot of that cropping up in ways that I just didn't really jive with. Doja Cat's attempt at like being an anti-hero in pop, I just think fumbled so fucking hard between just really cringy writing, performances that I think are intentionally meant to be not appealing, going a little too hard on the not appealing part, and a squandering of some decent production ideas with some of that just feels like a spit in the face, which debatably Doja Cat's aiming to do that anyway, but even if it does achieve what it wants to, I'm not going to reward that with like, I don't like what the album has going on in it. Like in some of the recent records before it on the list, there are moments that I think do stand out, but it's just buried beneath a lot of ideas that I think don't come together.
Can you ever forgive yourself? Do you wish that you loved?
I'm fully prepared to admit that this could just absolutely be a personal thing, but that's the thing about worst of lists and best of lists. Sometimes there's always going to be somewhere where you don't always agree. I know that Sleep Token are huge. They've taken the fuck off, and they have a pretty adoring, growing fan base, and I'm happy for them. I don't think that they necessarily make music that is poorly constructed, but it's music that I really didn't like. I don't like a lot of their production ideas. I don't think they gel well with the metal moments. I think the metal moments come too few and far between for the moments that do work in both fields. I think that it creates an uncanny valley sort of ordeal with me, which I think is part of the point, but again, that's cool, just not for me, man. Maybe somewhere down the line I'll revisit Sleep Token and have a complete reevaluation of the discography, but at least with this especially, do not like it. I think that it makes sense for, in some regards, for them to be popular because of the ways that they blend their style of singing with their ambience, and the heavy moments do feel like a real accent because of some of their sparseness. But I just think it is not good. I think that the songs, by and large, are a bit too boring and meander in some choice ways that I don't think keep me invested throughout their runtime. I know this is going to be a thing for some people because I do have friends that do like Sleep Token, and I'm sorry I don't. But if I'm being honest with myself, they had to be here.
We with it, then cop every bottle, get drunk, and then spill it all over the place.
Watch my shoes, I'm getting plenty money. How about you?
Baby, we
A lot of the complaints I had, especially in the December video, were records involving very overt sample usage, and in a handful of instances, both from vets from way back in the day to recent back in the day to newcomers. It was just a smattering of cashing in on a trend and floundering splendorously, and Busta Rhymes' version of that, complete with a handful of features that I don't think work well with him, in spite of actually having moments where they do better than him, in my opinion, on top of production that, outside of the sample-driven stuff, just feels like it's also trying to be trendy in all the wrong ways. Busta Rhymes is an artist that I think has done better, even in recent years, and just completely flopped with Blockbusta. It is the most Hey Kids record I've heard out of a hip-hop artist in a minute, and no disrespect to Busta, because I do like the guy, and I think he's a really good rapper, but I just think that this execution wasn't the move.
Fuck the hills, cause I'm living my life in the cut. Can't imagine that I'm gonna meet my wife in the club. We gon' see though, I feel like she more of a...
I really just don't think I like Jack Harlow either while I'm at it. And Jackman, while admittedly the most clearly put together and truest to the ideology of I'm making a real rap album, which I've also slammed Doja Cat for doing earlier in this video, does sound like that kind of album at its core. And there's some moments where he's talking about stuff outside of the pop stuff or even his own reflections that feels like it's trying to say something. But I just don't think Jack Harlow is a good rapper. And I think his anti-personality really sets back some of that messaging because of his just flat-ass delivery. I also just think that he writes some really wildly questionable bars sometimes. While not necessarily evident on some components of Jackman, I do think his new single really does fucking suck. And I think has some terrible bars in it.
Bitches getting money all around the world, cause girls is players too. What you know about living on the top?
I talked about this album not too long ago, just like Blockbuster, and just like Blockbuster, with its really bad use of samples, Coi Leray happens to go the step farther by taking samples that I've heard done well and doing either the most obvious, terrible thing with it, or like making this bizarre use of its core hook or core melody. Like I said in my review, I didn't have the highest hopes for this record when going into it, and some could say that's not fair to do for any sort of record. When prior to this, her style of pop rap wasn't my bag. Her I'm Going Mature album, trying to sort of skirt those lines of immaturity with maturity, I think just further ruin it as a complete cohesive experience.
And I heard NWA in the street from my older neighbor who was playing fuck the police. 11 writing graffiti, 15.
If we're talking about a recipe for disaster, though, from a smattering of sonic ideas that don't gel together with collaborations that feel like all the more wild considering they're mashed together on here, with Macklemore at the center of it all, not doing anything to make any of that all the more interesting, makes Ben one of the most baffling bores of 2023. This album is so excessively dull that it's just an enigma. Macklemore's waxing on Reflections while also seemingly tapping into some of the other white rappers that came after him that got popular for all the reasons he didn't. While the DJ Premier cut is alright, it's not worth it for this record, man.
Welcome to the city of lies, where everything's got a prize, gonna be in your favor.
Now, while I've had something positive to say about all of the other records, to at least a small fraction, Maneskin's Rush, not that sort of experience. There isn't a single thing I really like about this album, and when it came to like putting an album at the top of the worst list, even though I spun this back in January, I tried to get it out of my mind and try to find something worse, and when really looking at it, I just couldn't. Maneskin's version of like swagger-filled cock rock style rock music is just dull, overproduced, and atrocious, really. It feels like it's the type of rock music you would hear like a band make in a TV show that's satirizing a thing within culture. Maneskin's Rush is just not it in all of the ways that are terrible and make it the worst album I've spun in 2023. That's my list. What did you think about it? Did you like it? Did you not? Let me know your least favorite albums that you spun last year in the comments down below. If you like to give it a like. If not, it's okay. Be sure to subscribe anyway. I drop 2 to 4 vids a week depending on what I've got going on. I've got my best albums of the year list coming out tomorrow. Thank you again so very much for watching. I've been Valorek. You guys will get these lessons situations. And I'll see you another day.